So we'll call the meeting to order, and I'll look for disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I know Councillor Armstrong, you wanted to talk about consent items, and I'll look for any items that are pulled. I know Councillor Squire wanted number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like item number 3. I just wanted to spend a quick minute on the issue of consent items. I had a constituent who had a concern that quite often we go through items and we don't ask questions at all. Most times consent items are, or we'll call them items where in all likelihood there are no issues. Like for an example, a staff report on an issue. You'll see, like for an example, item number 7, which is a consent item. It's just simply a government form where the government's making us aware that there's an opportunity to for medals to be given out for good citizenship. It's just an FYI. And if you've read your agenda and understand it, the consent items in most cases are not an issue, though quite often some of us do pull them because we want an opportunity to ask a question or make a comment more often than not, or ask staff if they'd like to comment. So they're really sort of a bureaucratic bookkeeping item that we just deal with. So obviously schedule items are something different again. That's where quite often there's delegations or someone is going to speak to an issue or the reports that we really do need to discuss. So again, consent items, that's why quite often there are no questions.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong, for that. So we have number 2 and 3 pulled. Any other items to be pulled? All right. Sorry, Councillor Usher?
No, Mr. Chair, I don't want to pull any. I just want to address that. But however, I just want to advise you that I must leave here at 5:45 this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Usher. So we'll get the remainder balance put up on the screen and look for a mover and seconder. Any further discussion? So we're moving items 4, 5, 6, 7. And we'll call the question. And we're voting. Yeah, go ahead.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Councillor Squire, number 2.
Just, I note the staff recommendation that this matter be implemented in a citywide based model with 5 geographic areas. The feedback that I certainly got from my area and my ward was that was not their preferred method of dealing with the matter. Ward 6 is made up largely of neighborhoods, individual neighborhoods that identify in that manner. For instance, Old North, Orchard Park, Sherwood Forest, University Heights, they identify in that manner. So I found it very difficult to get engagement within my ward where they were not identifying on the basis that it was done last time. And I don't think this will also accomplish the same thing. So I am not supportive of method A being used, and I will be voting against that.
Any further speakers to number 2? Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I went through this and I hear what my colleague is saying. Unfortunately, I will have to say that I fully support the 5 item because it gets too complicated any other way. I do have concern about the boundaries though, because if I look down between White Oaks and Wellington, it seems as though we are splitting a great community of interest down there between Exeter Road and Commissioners Road along White Oaks Avenue. Lots of the people to the east have the same community of interest as the people to the west. I'm talking about that line that you have down there. Now, I do understand the fact that within portion of it, you do have the community center, you have the White Oaks Public School, where you have the family center, and you also have Oral Nichols Arena. And that takes in a lot of that area. I'm just concerned about why the line wasn't, and I assume that it's population-wise, why it did not come down along Wellington. Can you help me with that?
Through the chair, the number one reason we divided into 5 geographic areas this way, because we wanted to respect the boundaries of resident identified neighborhoods. So many neighborhood associations, formal and informal, have defined their boundaries. So when we divided the 5 areas, we looked carefully at the neighborhood associations because we want to keep the neighborhood associations together so that they can work on projects together. So that may have been one of the reasons. And also I'm willing to go back and look at this with the lens of communities of interest. But the second priority was the population, to try and keep it similar. But the number one was to keep the neighborhood associations and neighborhood groups together in a geographical area so that they could work together on projects.
Mr. Chair, I respect what you're saying, but I don't see it that way. This is my ward, and although I'm not looking for a ward thing, you're splitting Jalna, for example. You're splitting people who have the same community of interest between Warrencliffe and Wellington, and between commissioners and, I'll say, Southdale. And those people would not say to you that we don't have neighborhood organizations. Everything is South London. And they all depend on either Earl Nichols Arena or London South Community Centre for recreation and everything else. So the line that you have there, I'd really like to ask you to please look at that line, because coming down White Oaks Road, all the way down to Bradley, splitting it right there just doesn't make sense to me or the residents in that area, because they all have that same community of interest. And then you go down and you split it right across Bradley and come down Jalna, you're splitting the people. Everybody around Jalna have the same community of interest. And if there's ever a neighborhood, it's the entire Jalna circle. So please look at that and see. And I do understand and respect the population. I'm not so sure which one would take precedent over the other. Just seemed to me that the neighborhood would take a little bit more precedent than the population. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Asher. Councilor Morgan?
Thank you. So I came in part today to speak to number 2 because it's been something I've had an interest in. Well, neighborhood decision-making and empowering neighborhoods is something that I became a counselor for. And so I appreciate both the previous work on the strengthening neighborhood strategy, as well as the work that's been done on this. And I certainly appreciate some of the concerns raised by my colleagues in the method of rolling this out. And I think what we have to think about is how this would actually be rolled out. It's basically saying divide, the staff recommendation, divide into 5 geographic areas. But really kind of the next phase of how the decision-making is done in those areas will either, mitigate or exacerbate some of the concerns here. And I think it can be done in the right way. For example, in Medway Decides, we didn't restrict the voting to simply people who lived within a very strict geographic area, because there were lots of people who may have supported the types of initiatives happening in that area, since there's a district park and other things. And so if the voting is done in a way that is not 100% restrictive. In other words, we empower residents to vote on community decision-making projects where they feel the most comfortable to participate, because the project means the most to them. And if you live on one side of the line or the other side of the line, you can still participate in either of those decision-making projects, because really what we want is more people to participate. Then maybe some of these issues aren't as big as they seem when you look just at a line on a map. And I think that's how this is implemented in the next phase is really important. The other thing too is that a large grant of $50,000, I think some of the concerns about different communities in the sub areas and how they can participate in this, an approach that we could take would be to cap any individual project at some amount that's less than $50,000. In other words, force there to be multiple successful projects in a given area of the city, thus allowing multiple communities to kind of rally around their project and multiple projects to be successful. I think you saw that in the 2 iterations of the pilot project, and I think that's something we learned from the pilot, is that there were ideas of all scales and sizes and scopes. In Medway, there was one that was $800 that was successful. There was one that was $11,000 and successful. And people were equally passionate about both of those ideas. It wasn't about the size. The idea of how this rolls out in the next phase, I think, is a dialogue that is almost more important than approving the overall structure. It allows us to dig into some of the concerns that my colleagues might have about the way this is implemented. So I would be comfortable, and I'll sit and listen to the committee's debate, proceeding in the way the staff has recommended. And I think some of the concerns that have been raised can be mitigated in how that's rolled out across neighborhoods and communities and promoted to them, and who's allowed to participate and in what ways. I think something that hasn't been talked about that's really important is the idea of a small events neighborhood fund. I could tell you time and time again, small community groups who are just people who are volunteers are looking for ways to support their small neighborhood level events. And up until this point, there are very limited ways to do that. And so for the city to be moving in the direction of empowering small neighborhood associations who are just getting started or don't have the resources to, to put on events on their own, or are looking for support financially to have, a neighborhood event at a park or something like that. I think that's really great for us to do. And the final thing I'll say is that much like we piloted this, and much like we can roll this out across the city, it's certainly not something that we're tied to down the road if it's not functioning really well as 5 geographic areas. It's certainly something that can be broken down into more constituent areas, but the advantage of doing it in larger chunks allows our staff to learn from experience, to not divide resources in 14 different ways across the city all at once at one given time, and to continue to learn from neighborhood decision-making and quite frankly, catch up to where other cities have got on this, and then maybe move into smaller constituent areas as we build more capacity, people get used to what's happening, and people continue to get excited about the idea of participating. I guess I said that was the final thing I'd said, but I lied. There's one more thing I want to say. I don't think politicians are supposed to say they lie when the camera's pointed at them. But I think the empowerment and the scope of the participation, one of the things we did in the pilot project in Medway was we allowed more than just eligible voters to participate in the process. We allowed kids, classes, schools, people who could actually bring ideas. And in some cases, I think one of the winning ideas in Medway Decides, the $800 little libraries, was an idea from an 8-year-old who came forward, rallied support from her community, and hundreds of people voted to support her idea, and it got executed. So the more we can enfranchise and reach out to Londoners beyond the traditional kind of electorate voting base, I think the better. And this is a project and a process where we can learn how to do that very effectively and provide that avenue. So I hope the committee supports moving forward. I certainly will listen to the concerns, and I get to vote at council, but I wish you all the best in your discussion.
Councillors Usher and Councillor Squire, and the motion's up.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I don't think that anybody is going to argue with what Councillor Morgan just said. I think that that's exactly what we were talking about before he came in. My only concern is, because I'm familiar with that line that we have down in the south, I'm not looking for criticism on it. I just want commitment from the staff that they're going to have another look at that line, because it is breaking up one very close community of interest into two separate grouping. So I'm going to move this motion. I'm going to second it rather, but I'm just asking for staff commitment to look at it again. Okay, thanks.
Through the chair, we're happy to provide that commitment. I think what we've tried to indicate is a construct that we'd like to work within in terms of 5 geographic areas. The flow of that we can work with, and it's not hard and fast no matter how we do this. So,
Councillor Usher said nobody would disagree with Councillor Morgan. Unfortunately, I do. And I guess I should make myself a lot clearer than I did before. The pilot did not work well for the area that I represent. A couple of reasons for that. Their councillor was not involved at an early date, which was an issue. The second is that there was not the identification with the project from the area that I represent that is being suggested. I had an area that I represented that was rather large that I didn't even know initially was involved in the area. A whole other area made it very clear to me through their community association that they did not feel engaged in this process and would be doing, continue to do their own things about building neighborhoods, but did not view this as being neighborhood building or helpful to them. And I see that with the boundaries that have been created, that situation is going to continue to exist based on the boundaries, just by me looking at them. So I think it's great to theoretically sit here and say, we're going to do this, it's going to be wonderful. But I just want to be really clear that it didn't work for the area that I represent. And when I went to the actual rollout out of in the vote, it was very clear to me why it didn't work for my area. They did not have the votes or the presence to have their area recognized. So no, I'm not a fan of the pilot, and I think there's going to continue to be issues from my area with this, and I hope there'll be flexibility.
Any other further speakers? Councillor Cassidy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I understand Councillor Squire's concerns, and so hopefully there will be a way going forward to work within each individual councillor's concerns, like the ones he's brought up. I see the value in, and having read the staff report, I understand it's much easier dealing with staff resources and all of that. It's easier to facilitate 5 areas rather than, things going on in 5 areas rather than 14. As far as any of the boundaries or any of the ways we divide up the city, it's always going to be somewhat artificial. People identify sort of organically with the area that they feel that where they belong, or what their neighborhood is, what their area is. I'm glad that the staff report was not recommending option 1, because that, I believe, is probably the most artificial. Most people do not know, as the report says, most people do not know what their planning district is. I probably wouldn't have known it before either. But overall, I'm supportive. That's why I moved the staff recommendation. I'm supportive of this. I think, as Councillor Morgan said, something that may be voted on and happen in one area that's been divided this way will have benefits for people that, even if they weren't allowed to participate in that particular vote, but they'll still benefit from whatever the project is that takes place. And it's a way of divvying this up. It's a way of giving everybody a chance to vote on specific community improvement projects. And as I said, there will be no perfect way to divide this up. There will be no perfect way that satisfies everybody. I think this does the best job possible. And I'm supportive, as I said, going forward, and happy to move this.
Thank you. I don't think I see any further speakers. Oh, Councillor Helmer on the left.
A couple of thoughts. I think the discussion has been good so far. I'm not totally convinced that the 5 areas is going to work very well. I do like that Central London has been identified. And if you look at the contours pretty carefully, essentially, like, the older part of the city that was built out very early on is all included in one area. And I think that has some pros and cons. One is, a lot of the neighborhoods are very similar in terms of their built form, and maybe, the kind of improvements and things that people in those neighborhoods want to see happen might be very similar. Versus, along the edge of the city, on the outskirts, a lot of those neighborhoods were built out later on. They have a different kind of built form. They might want different things. And frankly, they have different kinds of civic infrastructure already in terms of parks and so forth, because they're just when they were built. There's a big line running right through my ward, cutting it in half, basically. And I'm not sure how that will work. I think there's a couple of other options that are not articulated in the staff report. One is combining wards into pairs, and to say there'll be 7 and we're going to pair them up, and we might change how we pair them up over time. 1 year it's 5 and 6 are together, another year it's 7 and 8 are together. That provides a bit more clarity, I think, for us as councillors. It still is a manageable number of units. It's not some new geographical area being created out of nothing. I think it's easy to communicate to people too. We're partnered up with another ward and we're going to make decisions together. I think the other option is to just have it be citywide, which is what we have with the Sparks program. And I understand the concerns that are articulated in the report, which is to say, well, like, really organized groups are tending to get a lot of the funding, and less organized groups really are not accessing it the same way. And there's a bit of an equity issue there, and I understand that. But I think there's also not a lot of, I don't think, problems about neighborhood level decision making and those kind of cool projects happening where there's resentment across, well, you know, it's over there and that's not, which seems to have come up with this more geographically bound, smaller area piloting. So there's trade-offs there. And the Sparks program, I think, it might have its downsides in terms of who's participating, but perhaps we can fix that by supporting some of the groups that are not participating now. And there's positive and proactive things we could be doing rather than, you know, dividing the city up into areas to make it more equitable. So, you know, because I could imagine in those areas, that same issue will persist, right? So, you know, in central London, there'll be some organized groups and there'll be some that are not so organized, and that will happen in those 5 areas as well. Broccoli as a neighborhood, it still has 400 people, right? It's not gonna have more people just because it's in Southeast London. And I think we'll run into some problems where, you know, the Southeast London piece of the map goes to Oxford Street, which I don't think anybody would describe as being anywhere south in London, right? And it's just not something that people connect with. It's certainly, parts of it are east, but it's very far up in the city. So those are my comments. I'm willing to try it though, see how it goes. I think that there might be the 7 combining words together might be better and simpler. But
Thank you. And I don't see any further speakers, so we'll call the question. So we split them out, so we're voting on part A first. And we'll look for a seconder on the screen. And we'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Part B, and we'll look. 4-1. Councillor Squire voted nay. We'll get part B up on the screen. Move and second it. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. And we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So we have item number 3. Someone pull that, Councillor, or was that a mistake? Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, Mr. Chair, I don't have any questions. This is to do with the East London Community Center project. First of all, I want to thank all the councillors in the past and some of the current ones for having support this project. I also want to take an opportunity to recognize, while I won't name them all, I hope some of them are watching the council meeting tonight from their offices. But I want to thank all the staff that have been involved in this project going back a number of years. It's an excellent project, well put together. I think what moved me the most is every time we had a community meeting, we had quite a few staff that were there willing to be there to explain to the community what the project was all about, answer their questions. So there was a lot of public engagement, which I think is really important because, of course, that results in the public understanding the project. And so it's all been very positive. So again, thank you to our staff for all the work they've done for so many years to finally make this just one more vote and its reality. So Argyle and East London can be very proud of a future facility that will soon be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Any further speakers? All right, and we'll get it up on the screen. Look for a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Cassidy, and we'll call the question. And we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So we have a scheduled item, number 8, staff delegation for age-friendly London. So as they're setting up, just for the members of the public, this should only, the presentation will take less than 10 minutes, and then just depending on how long the committee has a discussion, then we'll go to the public participation meeting, which I see some of you are here for, and then we'll open that up. So hopefully that shouldn't be too long. It just depends on how many questions these good counselors have.
Well, good afternoon, and through the chair, thank you for the time this afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to share our new Age-Friendly London Action Plan. I have a few members of the network with me here today to present the plan, as well as some members in the gallery that are attending. We're really proud of this plan. It reflects our continued commitment as a community to continue to be age-friendly and be even better. We were, as you probably know, we were the first community in Canada to become a member of the World Health Organization global network of age-friendly cities. And now we're one of the very first communities in Canada to complete the cycle of developing a plan, implementing that plan, assessing its impact, and moving to the next level. So we know that creating a city where older adults can participate and contribute, feel included and respected, and maintain a quality of life is even more important than ever before. As you will likely have heard in the media very recently, that for the first time ever in Canada, the number of older adults outnumbers children under the age of 15. This is quite significant. In London in 2016, we had a population of about 64,000 Londoners aged 65 and older, and we're anticipating that that number will more than double in the next 20 years. So it's a very important time of change in our community, and really important to think about how we can create a community where older adults can participate fully in our society and that we can all benefit from their talents and knowledge. We have relied heavily on the knowledge of older adults in our community in the development of this plan. And just to share with you a little bit of our history. So we finished our first age-friendly action plan, the implementation of that plan in 2016. We then, as you might recall, we were fortunate enough to receive an age-friendly grant from the province that allowed us to do an evaluation of our work to date, the impact that we were having, and also to support our next set of planning efforts. We reported back to you last fall about the results of our impact assessment, indicating that based on a number of indicators, their World Health Organization indicators as well as our own, we are showing progress on age friendliness in all 8 domains. As described by the World Health Organization, but it also confirmed that we have more work to do. We haven't done everything we could do to be age-friendly. And that is what formed the basis of where do we go in terms of our next plan. So we began that community plan last December and carried through that work to May. And in fact, on May 30th, the Age-Friendly London Network endorsed the plan that you see in front of you. There are some new things in this plan, and I'll turn it over shortly to my colleagues who will be taking you through a high-level overview of the plan. But one of the new things in the plan is that we learned through our impact assessment is the need to really pay attention to our network as a whole. And you see the strategies in front of you that we're going to put in place to do that. But there are 2 that I'd like to highlight in particular for you. One is about engaging and empowering all older adults. Our engagement process took a little bit longer with the development of this plan because we really undertook efforts to try and engage older adults from diverse and underrepresented communities, particularly including newcomers, immigrants, low-income seniors, persons with disabilities, Indigenous older adults, and members of our LGBTQ community. We began that work and had wonderful initial conversations and input, but there's much more that we need to do in that area, so that's going to be an area of focus for us. And the other area I'll highlight here is around working together to improve age friendliness. We really would like the network to become the place in our community where we're talking about age friendliness and what we can do as a community. And we would like that all of our partners, be they business, government, community, that everyone is applying an age-friendly lens to the work that we are doing as we move forward as a community. So in addition to the network strategies that you see in front of you, there are 8 domains of age friendliness that we work within. And I have with me today 3 members of our network who will be, as I said, taking you through a high-level overview. So Joyce Costanza, Monica Nascret-Reyes, and Jean Knight are with me today, and they'll be describing the strategies in each of these areas. So I'll just pass it on to Joyce.
Thank you, Lynn, and good afternoon, everyone. I've been a member of the Outdoor Spaces and Buildings Working Group since 2015. I am proud to say that we made some significant improvements in the first plan, and our new plan builds on these successes. Strategy number 1, to influence neighborhood design to support aging in place. Okay. Members of our group will work with the City of London to promote age-friendly design in new developments, as well as support older adults to lead safety audits. Strategy number 2, to increase the age friendliness of parks, pathways, and trails. We will promote our parks as age-friendly and continue to make improvements. This will include developing signage in parks to highlight amenities, accessibility, and how to be a courteous pathway user. Strategy number 3, to promote existing age-friendly programs and amenities in neighborhoods. This group will develop resources to promote indoor and outdoor places to walk, and in turn will encourage an increased number of older adults to be active. Transportation. The first strategy in transportation will engage older adults in the planning and development of transportation initiatives. This includes advocating for better accommodation of older adults, destinations, and transit route planning. Strategy number 2 is to improve the accessibility of city roads and sidewalks. This group will advocate for larger street signs and improve street crossing times where there is demand from older adult pedestrians. Strategy number 3 will increase engagement of older adults within neighborhoods to promote active transportation. One of the ways the group will do this is with a Walk Your City signage program. Strategy number 4, to improve accessibility of public transit. The group will develop a tool for residents to conduct audits of bus stops to ensure shelter and benches are available in safe and accessible locations. Strategy number 5 will improve transportation options for older adults across the city. The group this will include working with volunteer transportation organizations to increase capacity. Finally, we want seniors to have information they need about transportation. That is why we will host workshops to assist older adults who will benefit from using transit.
Thank you, Josh. Good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes a todos. Housing, accessible housing and affordable housing is essential to safety and well-being and quality of life. Strategy number 1 for the housing group is to raise awareness of housing options available for older adults. The group will share information on housing options such as home modification, social housing, and economic support. Strategy number 2 is to support and empower older adults to age in place with dignity. This will include exploring affordable and innovative housing options that allow the individuals to stay in their neighborhoods as they age. Strategy number 3 is to educate housing providers about the need sorry. No, it's okay. I will continue. Strategy number 2 is to support and empower older adults to age in place with dignity. This will include exploring affordable and innovative housing options that allow the individuals to stay in their neighborhoods as they age. Strategy number 3 is to educate housing providers about the need for more housing stock for older adults. The group will research and identify the gaps between housing stock and the demands. Then we can educate developers on needs. Social participation. The first strategy is to build a strong partnership among organizations to enhance social opportunities. The group will work with services providers to improve access to information about recreation and social programs. This includes information on accessibility and transportation. Strategy number 2 is to reduce barriers to participation. The group will look into implementation of an age-friendly buddy program to match isolated older adults with peers. Strategy number 3 will promote the many benefits of participating in meaningful activities. This group will create a video series to promote recreation and leisure for all older adults. Respect and social inclusion. I recently joined the Respect and Social Inclusion group because I am interested in how we treat seniors as a society, and I am one of the seniors. And I would like to see more seniors engaged and included. First, we would like to reframe how older adults are portrayed and celebrate their contribution in our community. We will implement a public awareness campaign to share positive stories about older adults and show how they are heroes every day in their communities. Strategy number 2 will increase and promote quality intergenerational opportunities. This group will establish a collaborative approach to engaging schools and youth organizations in intergenerational activities. Finally, we will empower older adults to have a voice in their own advocacy. We will identify opportunities for older adults to advocate within the healthcare field because we know that this is an area of particular interest. And we will collaborate to raise awareness of elder abuse. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you. Next, I will address employment and volunteerism. In their first strategy, the Employment and Volunteerism Group will continue to improve access to information about employment opportunities for older job seekers. The group will achieve this by promoting the employment tools they have created, such as the Experience Works 2 Toolkit, try saying that twice in a row, toolkit, and collaborating with existing employment service networks. Strategy 2 focuses on increasing meaningful volunteer opportunities for older adults. The working group will assist employers, unions, and retiree groups to promote volunteer opportunities to their retiring workers. Strategy number 3 will increase skill building opportunities. We know that older adults want more opportunities to build their skills and knowledge to support employment, volunteering, and lifelong learning. One avenue to achieve this will be to improve access to technology training and computer classes. Communication and information. I've been a co-chair of this working group since 2013, so this one is important to me. In our first strategy, we will push to communicate and promote the work of the network and our many accomplishments. Our group will create a communication plan and marketing strategy to raise awareness of the network and the 3-year plan. We also will create a toolkit of resources for the other working groups to use to communicate their own individual messages. Strategy number 2 will promote resources and tools that support our community to better serve older adults. This will involve promoting our age-friendly business resource guide and looking into an age-friendly connector program to connect older adults with information and services. Finally, the Community Support and Health Services Working Group. The first strategy aims to reduce barriers that older adults experience finding and using healthcare services and community supports. We see the network playing a larger role in advocacy, as been mentioned before. So the group will engage with health planning organizations to better understand where our members can have influence. Strategy number 2 will improve awareness of existing programs that support healthy aging. The group will partner with educational institutions to share information with future healthcare workers on healthy aging programs and supports that are available in the community. And finally, Strategy 3 will improve awareness and the availability of services for caregivers. A key action for this strategy will be to explore ways to improve relief, respite, and support for informal and family caregivers. Thank you.
So as you can see, there's been a lot of work done to develop our plans, and over the summer, the 8 working groups will be moving into developing their very specific implementation plans in terms of how we get those things done, identifying our timelines, the specific agencies, and the resources. Many of the strategies require collaboration between the groups, which is great because we have a network and we have a team to be able to support those folks. So with that, I'd just like to thank very much Joyce, Monica, and Jean for being here and presenting our community's new age-friendly London plan. I'd also like to thank the many members of the network who you see in this picture up here in terms of all the work that they did. We have many older adults who volunteer their time to this effort to try and improve things in our community. We also have many organizations, agencies and businesses that are part of our network who are working together to try and improve age friendliness for London. So together we are going to work towards our vision of an age-friendly London. And I thank you on behalf of everyone for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Livingston, and the group that made the presentation. I'm glad that you showed the picture here because I could recognize a lot of faces who have been involved with this for a long time, and including Jean. Jean has been working on this age-friendly thing, I guess. I won't say how long, Jean, but I know it's been a long time. I know how long it's been. So I certainly appreciate all the presentations, and I'm going to the committee to see if we have any questions or discussions. Anyone? Councillor Armstrong?
I too would like to thank all of you for the time that you've committed to this on behalf of everybody in the city and the work that you've done, and also want to also thank our staff for their efforts on this issue. So thank you all for what you've done.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for recognizing me. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the working groups and to staff for implementing this strategy. I'm pretty excited about it. I know sooner or later all of us are going to be glad for this plan, and it's comforting and to know that so much work is being gone into it, and I can just only imagine the work, so thank you very much. I do have a quick question through you to staff regarding how this process will be implemented. So one of the things that I hear from the community, and quite frankly, it's one of my concerns too, how we age in place. And when we look at our planning policies, in particular around aging, housing, aging in place, even our parks and pathways and trails and transportation, how is this strategy taken and shared with the different departments within City Hall?
Through the chair, I thank you for the question. We've actually established what we call our age-friendly City of London Champions table. So there are representatives from every area of the city, someone from transportation, LTC, planning, engineering, housing, my team, Bill's team, every area participates. So all of these strategies have been developed with the input from those staff. As well, this plan has been shared with our senior leadership team, and in order to make sure, because we wanted all the strategies to be feasible and implementable. So there's a great collaboration between city staff and the work of the network to move it forward.
Thank you for that. I know for me, it'll be sooner. So I'm really looking forward to knowing that our city is taking that initiative and looking at how we as old adults live in the city. So thank you.
Councillor Helmer, did I see your hands up? Okay. Councillor Cassidy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll add my thanks to the presenters. It was very informative, and this strategy is something that I think we should all be proud of as Londoners. I had the pleasure with Councillor Usher last week of meeting with the Minister responsible for Seniors Affairs. She came to London, Minister Demerla, and she gave a shout out to London for being the first age-friendly city in Canada. And so I think that's something we should all be proud of, because it says a lot. We talk a lot about London being a compassionate community, but I think it says a lot beyond that we value the contribution that all of our citizens and residents have made to the City of London, and that you reach a certain age, you don't just get discarded and forgotten, and your opinion and your everything is no longer important. I think having this strategy and having this philosophy of being an age-friendly community is something that, as I said earlier, everyone here in London should be proud of. Thanks.
Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask our staff, this action plan, can residents access it through the city website? Is it up there already, or are we still working on that? Just in case people want to look at it now.
Yes, we wanted to present first to committee and council, and it will be posted tomorrow.
Councillor Squire?
Through you, Mr. Chair, one of the things I like about this and looking at transportation and being a member of the London Transit Commission is you've come up with areas here and key points that I think you can very quickly engage London Transit in. It's very easy for me in looking at this to see where the areas are that you're interested in. And I think you should be able to get very direct access with staff at London Transit to work on some of these things. And the other benefit to it is you may not get everything you want when you meet with them, but there'll be a really good understanding on both sides of how far we can go with budgets, how it works, how decisions are made, and you can then spread that word out through the various networks that you're affiliated with. So that's what I immediately looked at transportation and thought those are very good areas to pursue and move forward on, and I wish the best of luck with that. And I know Councillor Helmer also sits on the LTC, and if we can provide any help, I know we'd be happy to do so.
Anyone else? Okay, before I call the vote, I just want to echo some of the thoughts that were mentioned here. First of all, I want to congratulate you and your staff, Michelle and, well, Councillor Cassidy and myself and Michelle and Paul went to the Chamber of Commerce last week. Was it Thursday morning, I believe? And we met with the minister, among some other people, but it was just a discussion, a chat. And we talked a little bit about transportation, housing, and a lot of other things for seniors. I should say that the minister's title is Minister of Senior Affairs, and she doesn't like old age. She doesn't like age or anything like that. She's trying to come up with another name for this, but that's okay. The fact is that she came, she talked, she listened, and what she's going to do after that is maybe, I don't know if she's going to get a copy of this, but hopefully she will. But on behalf of Council, I just want to thank you for this entire presentation and all the work that you've been doing. And I also want to put a plug in for previous councillors, because we've had an age-friendly committee for many, many years, and out of that it gradually progressed and evolved into what we are doing here. So once again, thanks very, very much. We'll call the vote now.
Thank you, Councillor Usher. It's been moved and seconded, and we'll call the question. Councillor Usher.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much, and thanks for that presentation and for all your efforts, and as well up there as well for the age-friendly team. So we're going to start the public participation meeting that many of you are here for. I also wanted to thank Member of Provincial Parliament, Teresa Armstrong, for joining us for this discussion, so thank you so much. So as we're setting up for this presentation, unless you're already ready, then I'll just be quiet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the fifth public participation meeting regarding the business licensing bylaw modernization review. We're going to have another meeting in July, which will address secondhand stores and some other business categories. And then in the fall time, we'll have a larger public participation meeting that will go over all of these categories. Some categories are new, as you know, door-to-door sales, payday loans, and some are just current categories that we looked at in terms of modernizing the regulations. So today the focus is on adult entertainment establishments. Municipal purpose of regulating these establishments is for the health and safety of the patrons, to address any nuisance concerns that they create in the neighborhoods, and for consumer protection of those individuals that attend these establishments. One of the things we did is we looked at the existing adult live entertainment regulations and body rub regulations, and we consolidated them into one category, adult entertainment establishments, because a lot of the activities are very similar in those establishments, and therefore a lot of the rules and regulations were also looked at in a consolidation fashion. One of the key issues that we looked at, which is a new regulation, is the licensing of operators. Quite often when we're inspecting these facilities, you can walk into a body rub parlor and see the attendants there with really nobody in control of the facility. So we looked at a number of municipal scans in terms of how other municipalities address these types of facilities, and we feel the licensing of operators would be a good policy for the city to have. The operators would have to ensure compliance with the bylaws, and they would also be responsible for an operational oversight of the facilities. We are carrying forward the process of adding new or replacement locations. We're carrying forward distance separations from schools, daycares, places of worship, and residential land uses. Throughout the business licensing modernization review, the delegation of legislative power to civic administration has come up over and over. And what that is allowing civic administration to look at regulations, post the regulations online, review them, and then approve them, and change them as operational issues arise, as opposed to bringing every issue to City Council for an amendment. And two of the operational standards we're looking at is hours of operation and advertising standards. Our municipal scan indicated that there's several municipalities that have hours of operations right into the operational standards of body rub parlors, mainly due to some of the activities that occur in body rub parlors late in the evenings related to criminal occurrences. As you know, City Council just approved a recent sign bylaw. We're also looking at any additional regulations specific to these types of establishments in terms of advertising standards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I look to my colleagues if you wanted to ask any technical questions now, or we go to the members of the public. All right. It's Councillor Elmer.
Thank you. And I know back in 2016, I think it was last summer, when this first came forward, there was some idea that you would have police record checks for attendants or entertainers, and I don't see that in the regulation. I wonder if you could just clarify that.
Yes, through the chair, based on further discussions that we had with other municipalities and the police, we abandoned that idea. Rather, we have a proposed regulation that these establishments keep a record of attendance and entertainers.
Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Any other technical questions? All right, so we'll get a motion up on the screen to open the public participation meeting. It's up on the screen. Just look for a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Armstrong, and we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much. So now, since the public participation meeting is now open, members from the public, whether you choose to come downstairs on this second floor to speak here, or whether you're comfortable speaking at the top, there's 4 microphones. You could just line up, and anyone from the member of the public is welcome to speak. I did consult with the city clerk just to confirm my colleagues, so this evening we won't be asking for names or addresses from people. So if you want to just come up, you can just speak. So in addition to that, if you do want to be contacted by the city clerk, you can just to find out the resolution of this item, you can contact us, or just make your way in the hallway and you'll find someone there shortly at the end of this discussion. So anyone's invited to speak at this time. Yep, just line up at a microphone and come on up. Yep. And you can adjust the microphone if you like as well.
Can you hear me?
And yes, and just as a reminder, everybody has 5 minutes, so I will be timing just to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak, and I'll try to waive you when we get closer to 5 minutes. So please.
Okay, well, I gotta step down here, sorry. Okay. My name is Moya McCarthy, okay, and I own 2 of the parlors here in the city and have for, I think, almost 20 years now, okay. I'm here today to speak on behalf of 4 licensed parlors. Somebody who couldn't be here, I'm also representing her. She also owns 2, okay? So we're here to operate for their operations management company, the 4 management proprietors, and almost over 70 female staff who currently work in London licensed adult entertainment industry. We have worked very, very hard to create a business that is recognized as one of the safest and most professionally run in the province of Ontario and also across Canada. We are proud of our reputation and have been recognized by entertainers from as far away as Calgary to Nova Scotia, who have heard that our parlors here in London are known for providing a safe and professionally managed business for any entertainer to work here in London. So we have one of the best reputations. Today, I am speaking for the vast majority of London's parlors. We stand together opposed to the proposed amendments and the negative impact on the adult entertainment industry. We are advising that we are in the midst of retaining legal counsel who will provide written submissions to the detrimental impact of this bylaw. We have been advised that these comments will be provided for your review and consideration within the next couple of weeks and well before your next scheduled meeting. We oppose the marrying of the live entertainment and body rub parlor licenses to be regulated as one. Although both are categorized under adult entertainment, the 2 types of businesses are very, very different in almost every way. One is a licensed club, and the other a spa where no alcohol is consumed. With respect to the proposed licensing of operators, as defined in your proposed bylaw, we question whether it is legal for the city to mandate licensing of individual managers within an already licensed regulated business, which is one of the reasons we are seeking legal advice. We challenge if it is legal for the city to mandate operators be present every minute the business is actually open. Their stated purpose for this is, and I quote, "The role of the licensed operator is to ensure compliance with the bylaw regulations and for operational oversight of the facility," which I believe the gentleman did state. This statement has upset many of the attendants that we do work with. Does the city not believe that the attendants do not have the capacity to keep dirty linen apart from clean linen? Do they believe that the attendants are capable of managing themselves? Does the city even know that our own operational protocols exceed the bylaw expectations by over 100 times what it is asked for. These are women of 20, 30, 40, 50, and even 60 years of age. Frankly, I think they feel judged with extreme prejudice. The suggestion of forcing the business to license and staff as a glorified babysitter to enforce bylaw regulations, it's almost insulting. We already have multiple inspections a year, and to date, none of our businesses have even been convicted of any bylaw infractions. We ask you to follow up with the city's appointed inspectors to obtain their unbiased observations during these inspections and how they feel that we do run our business. And I'm not sure if that's been done or not. The proposed amendment alone shows that the creators of this bylaw took little or no time to consult even the industry that they want to further regulate and have no working knowledge of our business or our business environment. In addition to our many concerns, we also oppose any implementation of regulation of our hours of operation. We've been operating for years with our current hours of operation with no negative occurrences and ask that you follow up with enforcement to confirm this statement. Has this been done? We are greatly concerned that this document states, and I quote, "Civic administration is continuing to review this matter as it pertains to late night criminal occurrences at body rub parlors." That makes you wonder who is making these allegations. And I ask the city to provide us with a list of these occurrences and statistics in relation to London parlors. As far as we are aware, there have never been any criminal occurrences at our parlors during operating hours. So this would be, if you could confirm this, give us a list, so be it. We feel this proposed bylaw is nothing more than an attempt to regulate and tax the licensed industry to death. This proposed bylaw would drive the cost of operating a licensed business so high, the sale of our services sold could not sustain it. And more than 70% or 70 people would be put out of work. The proposed bylaw is mandating that we increase our management costs without providing any justification. Okay. Even calculated at the soon-to-be minimum wage of $15 an hour, that increases my management expenses by more than 4 times than what it is now. So I ask you, what company, if any, could absorb such an increase? Ultimately, the consequences of this bylaw hurts the attendants and the families that they support. The city will inadvertently be forcing the attendants out of a safe working environment that has structure, has safety protocols, security, and mentorship from other industry workers. While you are striving here to regulate what doesn't need more regulation, you turn a blind eye to the ever-increasing presence of unlicensed, unregulated, unmonitored, independent entertainers that have flooded London hotels at a cost of a few dollars for an internet ad. Maybe bylaw enforcement needs to turn their attention towards those who operate outside the bylaw and zoning regulations. So in the process, they'll do some good for the City of London and maybe even have an opportunity to help some people too. Thank you. I know my time is up.
Thank you. And thank you. So I just want to remind members of the public, just any applause, boos, or different perspectives, as we want to ensure that everyone's going to have their opportunity to have their perspective here. So we want to encourage a decorum in this room. So I'll look for any other speakers. And we'll see the gentleman on the left.
It's Councillor Sala. Members of the committee, my name is Christos Vitsenzatos. I'm a lawyer here.
If you could just get right in front of the mic so we can hear you.
It is on, thanks. My name is Christos Vitsenzatos. I'm a lawyer here in town. I represent the 3 license holders for the live adult entertainment establishments. All 3 are present here and find that they oppose the bylaw amendments has been presented. The approach that they take is more from a legal perspective. The bylaw is vague. The definitions are not tenable. We don't understand, and nor can anybody how the definitions apply to the working aspects of the bylaw. There are several issues that I want to highlight from a legal perspective. The mirroring of two separate industries and the commingling of the definitions of those industries isn't workable. It's not proper, and it should not take place. How you define a adult live entertainment parlor, and even the use of the word parlor as it relates to present-day society is rather archaic at best. But the live entertainment industry and the body rub industry are two separate businesses and should be treated separately. The bylaw doesn't account for the differences in those businesses. And as Ms. McCarthy indicated earlier, that there's a spa and a club. Alcohol is served in one, not in the other. We're all adults here that attend these establishments, and we're not giving the due diligence and the respect to those adults to manage the businesses and to conduct themselves in an orderly fashion. One of the primary concerns is the expansion of the licensing manager's role and responsibilities. It appears that there's an unfettered, unchecked, and frankly, an unlimited amount of power given to the licensing manager to prescribe operational standards. I'm not sure if the City of London wants to get into the live adult entertainment industry by prescribing operational standards. I don't think that's the business of the councillors or of the operational manager. They should let the businessmen and women in the City of London who have been doing this for decades continue to operate their establishments. I can appreciate that the city wants to put some insight and some minor limits around that, but to have an unfettered and a completely unchecked power to prescribe regulations is definitely not within the power of this council, and definitely should not be something that should be considered. The proposed bylaw doesn't have any of the specifics that an operator or an owner of the establishment would require in order to ensure compliance within their business. The bylaw lacks substance, it lacks directive, and it needs to be further expanded through consultation with all of the stakeholders. Now, I act for the three owners here in town. Teresa Simone, who is a lawyer in Toronto, acts for the managers and the operators, as well as the entertainers in the adult live industry. She is unfortunately unable to attend today. Ms. Simone's provided me with a letter, which I'll pass to Councillor Sala, indicating that she is unable to attend, but she does wish to participate in further meetings. I would say that further meetings clearly are required in this manner to allow all of the stakeholders an opportunity to consult and to provide you with further information. I can go through several of the issues that relate to the bylaw. The prohibitions section is clearly a problematic one for all of the participants, namely the owners, operators, and the entertainers. The section 7.4, for example, limits persons to the age of 18 from entering the establishment, but then that will then reduce the employment opportunities for wait staff, for dishwashers, etc., in those establishments. Section 7.7, which is the no touch, I'll use that term in quotes, provision is not tenable. It makes no sense as it is drafted in my comments to council. It discriminates between an attendant in a body rub facility as well as versus an entertainer in a live entertainment establishment. So we've got a problem right there that you clump them together and you allow them to do two separate jobs, but you tell them they got to comply to the same regulations. So there's a problem at the start in that. The regulations are unattached. They need to be further expanded. Further consulting needs to take place in relation to the regulations. I want to impart a couple of thoughts to council. That this is an industry that has had very little issues over the past, say, decade, at least that I've been involved in council to the industry. The convictions for bylaw infractions are very few. You take that into consideration with other industries, you would see that the numbers are minuscule. I can advise that the need to regulate broadly should not exist here. It should be focused on a couple of areas, but not to provide unlimited powers to the licensing manager to set owners and operators up for failure. They don't know how to comply with something that doesn't exist or is so ambiguous.
If you could just wrap up, thank you.
Thank you. On that basis, I just would like to thank you very much for the opportunity to provide comments. The operators are clearly, or the owners are clearly opposed to the proposed amendments, and we welcome further consultation. I understand that this matter is going up again in September for another discussion. I would suspect, and I would welcome that meeting be a further consultation as opposed to providing a draft bylaw without all of the stakeholders present. Those are my comments.
Thank you very much. And the clerk is, and again, just remind everyone, no applause or, and sir, the clerk will grab your notes from you as well if you, the letter you mentioned. So we'll look for any other members of the public that want to speak at this time. So I'm going to go, sorry, Councillor Armstrong, did you want to say something? Sorry, go ahead. So going once up here, any other speakers? Going twice and up. I think we have speakers down here that are ready to speak as well. I'm just setting up.
Chairman, Councillor Salee. Hi, I'm really happy to be here. My name is Megan Walker. I'm the Executive Director of the London Abused Women's Centre. And I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Heather Warham, who is the Director of Programming, and Sandra Lynn Coulter, who's the Director of Research and Development. And I've spoken with Councillor Salee today, and we've decided to merge our time rather than speaking about the various areas separately. I first of all want to say how much I appreciate the work of your bylaw enforcement division, as I do all of your staff. Orst and George and the team I've had to work with over the years on sex trafficking issues or advertising offenses as it relates to police investigations. And I've always been very appreciative of their respect that they've shown towards our agency. First of all, just so you know about our area of expertise with respect to this issue, we have been providing for the services to trafficked and prostituted and sexually exploited girls and women since 1998. And we recently were funded through the Justice Department in Ottawa to provide service, and we partnered with the Salvation Army Correctional and Justice Service to do that. During the first 20 months of the program, we have seen 915 women and girls who have been served, and that includes 233 prostituted and exploited women and girls, of which 203 identify as being trafficked, and 101 prostituted and exploited women and girls who have attended a specialized tripod group, which deals with the correlation between mental health, addictions, and trauma. We've served 70 family members who call us in deep despair because their underage daughters have been reported missing into the world of trafficking. And they are following those girls to make sure they're alive or dead through Backpage.com. And we've also served 510 at-risk women and youth. So what we know, let's be real. So what we know as factual is that 65% of human trafficking cases reported to police across Canada originate in Ontario. We know that of those Ontario reported cases, about 70% are for the purpose of sexual exploitation. We know that the majority of trafficking survivors in Ontario are Canadian citizens or permanent residents. We know that the average age of entry in Canada into prostitution is age 14, and for Indigenous girls, it's age 12. We know that prostitution fuels prostitution and childhood sexual exploitation, and we know that there is incredible amount of trafficking along the at the hotels and motels along the 400 series highways leading from Windsor all the way into Northern Ontario. And London is both a destination for those girls and is also a city which is actively has both organized crime and Romeo pimps who are recruiting girls. So let's talk a little bit about the federal legislation, which we know that does trump municipal bylaws and municipal legislation or acts. We now have what is called the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. It's legislation which was originally known as C-36. We worked extensively with all levels, all parties in the Conservative government during this development of this. And what we know is that prostitution disproportionately and negatively impacts on women and girls, and that the majority of those in prostitution and trafficking are women and girls, and that marginalized groups are disproportionately represented, and we should pay attention here that 50% of underage girls sexually exploited into prostitution are Indigenous, and 51% of trafficked women are Indigenous. We also know that poverty plays a key in recruitment of girls and girls who may say they're actively choosing to enter. And what we know is that if provided with real choices in their lives, they would not be making the decisions to enter prostitution or trafficking. It is an extremely dangerous activity which poses a risk of violence and psychological harm from johns, pimps, and third parties. And it reinforces gender inequalities by normalizing women's bodies as commodities to be bought and sold. So we know that pimps may pose as helpers, managers, boyfriends, or providers of assistance, and that commercial enterprises where prostitution takes place create opportunities for trafficking. And this is a really key slide because let's talk about what the Protection of Communities and Exploited Person Act details in its technical paper. It states that the legislation seeks to denounce and prohibit a number of things, but including the institutionalization of prostitution through commercial enterprise, such as strip clubs, massage parlors, and escort agencies in which prostitution does take place. So let's not listen to a lawyer that stands behind me and says he's opposed to a no-touching law, because the reason he would be opposed to that is what's going on in massage parlors and strip clubs in lap dancing is all about touch. The preamble also talks about the following activities which have been found to constitute a sexual service or an act of prostitution, including lap dancing, which involves sitting in the client's lap and simulating sexual intercourse, masturbation of a client in the context of a massage parlor, and it's irrelevant whether the client has climaxed or not. And finally, acts for which consideration is provided that take place in a private room, in a club, or that are sexual in nature, but do not involve physical contact between the client and the performer, such as self-masturbation, and those things all constitute prostitution. So let's be clear and let's be real. What we're talking about is prostitution. There are a number of offenses, including the purchasing offense, which is to obtain sexual services or communicating for that purpose. I think we also need to talk about the advertising offense. It is illegal to knowingly advertise and offer to provide sexual services for consideration. And it's also an offense that applies to publishers or website administration. So when Orr spoke about monitoring the advertisements to make sure they comply, it's actually illegal for them to be advertising for the purpose of prostitution. Material benefit offense, which receiving a financial or other material benefit obtained by or derived from the commission of a purchasing offense, and the communication offense, which does discuss communicating for the purpose of prostitution or solicitation in public places that are next to playgrounds, schools, or daycare centers. So We do have some recommendations for you. We believe that it's absolutely imperative that City Council, through its staff team, consult with the Department of Justice, and we can provide you with the names of the senior advisors that wrote the legislation, because we believe it's important that everybody understand this legislation known as C-36, or the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. We would also suggest that you can't regulate activities that are criminalized. And so, for instance, when we talk about the health and safety of patrons, well, the patrons are Johns, and it is illegal for them to be purchasing sexual services from women and girls. And so we actually don't care if they suffer health and safety repercussions. We're concerned about those girls and women that are exploited into prostitution. And C-36 has addressed its legislation to be very specific to the needs of those who are most vulnerable, women and girls in prostitution, and not Johns. And we would also ask that you develop a municipal strategy and public awareness campaign which would suppress the conditions that are inherently conducive to crime in prostitution. And I've included a Ontario Court of Appeal case where it was made clear that that is perfectly legal. It's York versus C. And I'm happy to provide you as well with the link to that. So in reality, I can tell you that body rub parlors and strip joints where there is a payment for sexual services is prostitution, and many, many girls that we have worked with have been trafficked across this country into both strip joints and body rub parlors. So I would ask you to pay special attention to those comments. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to look for any other speakers at this time. So this is going to be your opportunity. So I'm going to ask 3 more times. Anyone's free to speak. So going once, going twice, and we'll look for a motion to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Armstrong. So it's been moved and seconded, and we'll call the question. And we're voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much. And thank you for members of the public for weighing in. You can, there's going to be some discussion with our colleagues here, and staff are going to have the opportunity to respond to some of the concerns that you raised. I did want to mention that I did allow for people to speak over 5 minutes. The last speaker had to combine their minutes with the other people as well. So that's, if you're wondering about that piece, you might have missed that piece. So, Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank all the presenters for being here today and providing us with information. I guess the concern I have is that I understand that one of the presenters, council, has or will be making a submission to us. That's what I thought I understood, and perhaps has part or all of that submission here today. I also understand that there's quite a bit of information that's been sort of brought forward right now to us, and I guess the thing is, the other part is there. I think I'd like to hear from legal on this issue. But legal wasn't here for all the presentation. So I'm concerned that we should have legal advice on this because there's a number of issues I hear. And quite frankly, I haven't read the federal legislation. I wouldn't mind an opportunity looking at that and then hearing from our legal counsel on that. So I don't know how other committee members feel, but I'd like to receive all this information before we move forward with this, and also hear from our legal department, and also ask them whether or not they wish to give any opinions in public or in camera on this issue and whether or not we should go in camera at some point to hear from them. And I'm not expecting that they will be able to answer all the questions today. So in any event, perhaps we can hear from legal through you.
Of course, legal, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not really sure what the question is that the good counselor would like me to answer. I did hear the presentation, and I don't know specifically what it is that is being directed to me. So if you could clarify that, I'd be most pleased to answer.
Well, I'm not really, I guess the thing is, I've heard that a few minutes ago that some decisions, depending on what we decide to do, may actually be in contravention of federal legislation. That was my understanding in regards to Mrs. Walker's presentation. And if that's incorrect, I'll pose the question through you if Mrs. Walker could clarify that if that was what she was suggesting.
So I'll go to legal, and if Ms. Walker wants to respond, I'll let her. She can wave at me, and I'll make sure she gets an opportunity.
Thank you. With the greatest respect, I did not hear Ms. Walker state that, but I leave it to her to correct if I'm wrong. The issue, though, in terms of the division of powers, the federal government has jurisdiction over criminal law. Municipal governments do not. We regulate businesses, and business licenses is one way that we do that. And so I think that might be perhaps the clarification that's being sought. So the City of London does not pass criminal law, but it can regulate businesses for valid municipal purposes. And that would be the advice I would give you with respect to that.
So I see Ms. Walker is ready to respond if the company, and if we'll just get a microphone on for her.
Oh, sure thing. So what I indicated was that no municipality in this country can endeavor to pass any municipal bylaw that would contravene with federal legislation around criminality.
Thank you. Councilor Armstrong, the floor is still yours.
Well, that's what I thought I heard as well. So there's a suggestion that by licensing these businesses and their activity, that Mrs. Walker is suggesting we are in fact licensing criminal operations or criminal activities, and we don't have jurisdiction to do that. Now, am I wrong about that? Because I want to understand how this works.
So for instance, hours of operation is not a criminal offense, but to talk about, for instance, providing measures to accommodate Johns or men that are purchasing sex would be illegal. So what my recommendation was, because there is some criminal element to some of what's happening in body rub parlors and strip joints, I suggested that perhaps there could be consultation with the senior legal advisors with the Federal Department of Justice to ensure that it's compliant. Because one of the things we don't want to see happen is a constitutional challenge around this issue. And we've already heard from some of your delegations upstairs that they have retained lawyers, and we've heard from one lawyer already, and there is precedent-setting cases, the one I mentioned in fact, that I think could help clarify the parameters around the bylaw.
Thank you. Councilor Armstrong, are you good? I'm seeing a hand from legal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think, as I've said to you, the federal government regulates criminal law. The municipal government has a power delegated to it through the Municipal Act to license businesses. And so what the courts look at is they look at the bylaw, they look at the pith and the substance of the bylaw, and they look at, the dominant aspect or the dominant purpose of the bylaw. And so recently there was a Court of Appeal case in Ontario that was regulating adult entertainment parlors, and the court found that the scope of the regulatory power exercised by the Region of York in that case did was properly exercised as a municipal power in terms of business licensing. So if there are things that the council wants us to look at, report back on, we would be happy to do that. I'm not so certain that, I don't take issue with Ms. Walker's understanding in terms of what's municipal jurisdiction and what's federal jurisdiction, but I don't know that our analysis of that would be including a consultation with the Justice Department. But we would certainly provide you with the written advice if you want anything further on what Mr. Katolik has presented to you today.
Councillor Squat. So sorry.
The Court of Appeal case that I referenced is actually the one that's just been spoken about by your legal counsel.
Thank you. Sorry, so before Squire was Councillor Usher, then Squire.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want everybody here to know that I respect their opinion and I respect their presentation, all of them. This is the first time I'm seeing that you're allowing, after the public participation meeting, a debate for people to come forward. I respect those decisions. It's just that we have to be careful because if you allow one person, then you may have to allow others. So all I say is just be careful with that. True.
So if I get an opportunity to respond, so hold on. All right. So I'm going to ask for decorum. So Councillor Usher, respectfully, you're wrong. Councillor Armstrong had a question directly for Ms. Walker, and that's why I allowed it. So I wanted to give the councillor an opportunity to have his question answered.
Well, I'm not going to debate that, Mr. Chair. I just made my comment, and I think that I'm right. Anyway, I want to ask a question to Mr. Katolik. And I don't have, by the way, I want you to know that I respect everything Ms. Walker said. I just think that we have to be careful that we are fair in dealing with this. My question is to Mr. Katolik. This is one thing in a number of business bylaws that we are bringing up. Over the past 2 or 3 meetings, we've been bringing up different ones. This is one item today, and there'll be others. Am I right with that, Mr.?
Yes, you're correct.
And right now, do we have a charge for these license? It sounds to me when I read the report that what we are doing, we are the owners of these establishments are charged. What is it? They have to pay a license fee, but now you're bringing it into 3 different categories, if I remember rightly. Am I reading that rightly?
Yes, through the chair, there currently is a licensing fee for both categories. What we are proposing to do is to consolidate the 2 categories, still have separate licensing fees for the categories, and introduce a new licensing fee for an operator.
Mr. Chair, through you to our legal, is there, from your opinion, based on our past experience, because it seems to me that over the past 2 months, we've been increasing some fees and reducing some fees based on the type of businesses, starting with parking and restaurants and so on. Now we are coming to these type of businesses. From your experience, from your knowledge, in changing these fees from 1 to 3 different categories, do you see anything contravening any laws in that respect? If you could answer that now. I would like a legal opinion on that.
To the extent that you want to speak to these types of things in open session, Mr. Katolik has on numerous occasions advised you that licensing fees are set to reflect the administration and enforcement costs of the bylaw, and that there has to be a nexus or a connection between them and the fee. And so I would let Mr. Katolik speak to that directly. The Municipal Act gives you powers to license businesses, different classes of businesses, and gives a broad power to differentiate in any way that the municipality sees fit. So if that answers the question, I can elaborate it further, but. Okay.
So now I'll ask Mr. Katolik the same question. Mr. Katolik, you did your research on this, and you are quite satisfied that we have a right to be able to modify the one fee to 3 different categories of fees?
Through the chair, the current licensing fee for an adult entertainment body rub parlor is $2,615. We are proposing a fee of $3,173. The current licensing fee for adult live entertainment parlor is $5,115. We are proposing a fee of $4,061. And we are proposing a new fee of an operator of $504. These fees take into consideration the nexus of the administration and enforcement of these categories with respect to costs.
Okay, that's a great deal. So we've got 2 different fees right now, and we are expanding it to 3, and we're changing the other 2. And that's simply what we're proposing here, am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
Mr. Katolik, through you, Mr. Chair, I hope this is my last question. Somewhere in here you talk about the number of this type of businesses, and there are 2 different types today, but you're combining them and you're making them one type. Are we charging the same fees regardless of what kind of operation it is? These fees that you have in the recommendation on page 94, that's regardless of the type of operation?
Through the chair, no, we're keeping the fees separate for the different types of categories. So even though we're calling this business category adult entertainment establishment, within that category we have 4 types of categories: adult entertainment body rub operator, adult entertainment body rub owner, which we currently have, adult entertainment parlor operator, and adult live entertainment parlor owner, which we currently have. So the increase in the type of category is for the operator, which we currently are not licensing. Although throughout the existing L6 bylaw, the term operator is noted on numerous occasions.
Well, I guess where I'm getting a little confused, Mr. Chair, is I want to be sure that you mentioned 4 different types, but here you're mentioning 2. You talk about body rub and entertainment. I want to be sure that I understand it. Those are 2 separate types that we're making it now. And with respect to the operator is for either?
Yeah, so if you were, through the chair, operating a adult entertainment body rub parlor, your fee would be $504. If you were an operator of a adult live entertainment parlor, your fee would also be $504. And the regulation indicates that at the times the establishments are open, an operator has to be on site in terms of managing the establishment.
Thanks for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Squire, and then Councillor Armstrong.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just have a question. In the past, Mr. Katolik, when we've been dealing with these bylaws as they come forward, members of whatever industry it is have spoken and said, we have concerns about this part or another part, and you've undertaken that before the bylaw comes back, you will sit down with them, talk to them about those particular issues, and take their input and then come back to council. And I think the concern I heard from the industry is that they want to have that opportunity. And I just want you to undertake, if you can, or Mr. Kotsovas, that they will be provided with that opportunity to provide input and discuss with you. There is a lawyer and there's an owner. Is that something you're going to undertake to do?
Absolutely. We're going to follow the same process that we began back in January of this year with all the other categories.
It seems to me that we're dealing with 2 different issues here. The first is the municipal function of licensing these particular businesses. And it's not a moral judgment, whether it's not for myself or another councillor to make a judgment about that. And as long as their concerns in terms of licensing are dealt with and heard, that's fair. The second issue, and I think Ms. Walker is raising legitimate issues about criminal activity, which is an entirely different matter. And if criminal activity is happening in any of these premises, it should be dealt with. And it should be dealt with according to whatever the law may be. Then the last issue that it seems to me we're dealing with, and I accept what Ms. Walker is saying in that regard, and I think to be very fair to her, when she stood up, she indicated that is what she's addressing. But the last issue is this idea of municipalities somehow jumping into the idea of working on the issue of prostitution and the effects of prostitution. And I think that's a large issue. And I'm not sure in the context, that's an appropriate issue to be dealt with in the context of licensing what is otherwise a legal business. So I'm having trouble making that connection between saying, look, we're going to deal with the issue of prostitution, human trafficking, all of those things as a municipality. That's a decision that we will make or won't make. But today we're dealing with licensing. We're dealing with the licensing of a business. So I'm content to have this matter go back, have the industry speak to you, and then it will come back to council and we will deal with it. So that's how I look at it today in any event.
Just wanted to confirm, Councilor Scott, were you putting a motion to refer, or?
Well, it should be referred back to staff the same way we've referred every bylaw back, and staff can come back and provide us with changes. We can then judge as councillors, have the concerns of the industry been addressed? Do we want them to be addressed, or do we agree with the bylaw? I don't view it any differently than anything we've done in the past. So I think that was the ultimate goal, and I would move that it be referred back to, once we close the PPM, which we have, that it be referred back to staff for consultation with the industry, it to be brought back to council.
And Councilor Armstrong, go ahead, and I'll come back to you, Councilor Squire. Sorry.
I'm happy at the end of my comments, etc., to second that motion, but I did still have some issues that I did want to discuss, and I'm going from memory here, because I have dealt with this issue, I don't know how many times over the years, at least a couple. I wanted to talk about, on page 14, there's a license that's issued for the corner of Dundas and Industrial Road. And if I remember, if an operator didn't operate for a period of time, I think it was a year, that at that point it was at council's discretion that we could cancel that license. And am I wrong about that? And is that still on the books there? And can you bring me up to speed on that particular issue, and then we can perhaps comment on that site?
Yes, through the chair. I think you're referring to Flesh Gordon's, and that's at the corner of Dundas and Industrial Road. There's a current building permit application and a license application for a new operator at that location. So that was closed for reasons other than licensing. That regulation, we're not recommending that it be carried forward into the new bylaw because it's very difficult to indicate when a facility is closed and open for its services. We went through this same discussion about 6, 7, 8 years ago with respect to another adult live entertainment facility on Dundas Street. And we also discussed one which changed hands into operating a restaurant tavern. And so that was obvious that that was no longer operating as a adult live entertainment facility.
Okay, so I guess the thing is that regulation bylaw is still on the books. We were 8 years ago, we were led to understand that if you didn't operate for a period of time, it was council's discretion to cancel the license. And so I need to understand if that opportunity is available today. If somebody has applied for a new license to operate there, or whatever the case may be, the fact is, I'm pretty sure that that place hasn't operated for a very long time. So I would like to know whether or not, and maybe through you to our legal department, do we have an opportunity based on the current situation, if it hasn't operated for a year, whatever the time frame is, can we make that decision whether or not we wish to reduce the number, I believe, the number of licenses?
Sorry, you're looking for a response from legal? Sorry, legal?
Through the chair, I just wanted to clarify the history of the licensing on that specific property. Even though there was other issues related to that property, why it was closed, I believe the AGCO was involved. They continued to renew their license on a yearly basis. The new operator came in, also applied for a license, and applied for a building permit for renovations to open up a adult live entertainment facility under a new name.
Well, I guess the thing is, maybe when staff reports back, I'd like in camera to find out whether or not somebody applying for a new license, I'm assuming it's a corporate entity, did they acquire the old license? Because if you acquire an old license, you buy it or whatever, then it's transferred. But if you're telling me that there was an old license there under a corporation and now a new entity is coming forward and saying, we'd like a license, that's a new license in my mind, and I don't want an answer to that, but perhaps, unless it's in camera, because, you know, that would be my thought, and I don't know if legal counsel would like to comment on that or not. But again, the issue was not maintaining a license, but that they actually had to, if I remember, operate. And that was the question about that other issue many years ago, not far away, that it came down to a simple question. Did they conduct business operations over a period of year? And we couldn't be sure whether that had happened. And if you recall, that was something to do with a one-time event at Christmas, and that's why that license remained in place. This place has not had any operation for, I think, way more than a year. So regardless of whether they paid their license fee, they weren't operating. So my submission would be that I'd like to know if we have an opportunity to reduce, again, eliminate that license. So I don't know whether or not we should hear that in camera or out of camera, or whether our legal staff has had an opportunity to give us a solid opinion whether or not we can eliminate a license.
So I see Mr. Costas and our legal team ready to speak, so whoever.
I believe my issue's already been addressed. I was just going to address Councillor Squire's concern about how we've been dealing with the bylaws, and it appears that what you have up top is consistent. We've only been having these reports received for information at these times, and we come back. They haven't been referred back, but I read up top that that appears to be consistent with the way we've been handling our previous bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that the good councillor is referring to the provisions in the business licensing bylaw, and the existing section is 3.29. So, you know, that's something that could be reviewed by the councillor asking the question between now and the council meeting. I just want to draw to your attention that I may not be understanding the question, But it appears to me that there might be a commingling or a crossover of how the taxi licensing provisions apply and carrying that over to adult entertainment parlors in terms of transferring licenses, et cetera. That's not the case under the business licensing bylaw. The business licenses are not transferable for adult entertainment, live adult entertainment parlors and adult entertainment body rub parlors. There are fixed locations that are defined in the bylaw. They're in the schedules to the bylaw, and it allows someone to operate a business at those locations. It's not exclusive to one operator. So if one operator ceases to operate and a new person wants to come in, then it's open for them to do so. The provision on 3.29 speaks to with whether a parlor has over a previous 6 consecutive calendar months, no entertainment has been provided in an adult entertainment parlor, or if, for instance, a license has expired and not been renewed during that 6-month period. But I don't believe that applying a similar interpretation that you have with the taxi bylaw and the taxi licenses and transferability is applicable in this instance. Mr. Katolik and Mr. Kotsifis could certainly report back in terms of the status of a particular location in the application of Section 329. And I'll just leave it at that. But that is the section that I believe the councillor is referring to. And again, you have locations that are set. The Municipal Act allows you to do that. You've set those locations. There are also provisions in the bylaw that speak to perhaps changing one of those locations, deleting one and substituting a different one as well.
Okay, I would like a report back on that issue, on whether or not we have the opportunity to eliminate one license, because 6 months, that's been a couple years. So that license, we should have had looked at this earlier if that opportunity exists, but we don't know right now. So if we could have a report back on that. And in the meanwhile, I'm assuming that if there's an application for a new license for that location, that while we wait for that report back, that no license be issued. Because I wouldn't want a license to be issued only to find out that we had an opportunity to reduce the number and have that discussion. So I think in the meanwhile, and Mr. Katolik, through you, Mr. Chair, can you not issue a license while you come back with giving us an opinion on that 3.29 and whether or not we can reduce the number?
So I just see staff are consulting. I'm not sure. You can maybe give him a moment. If we want to go, sorry, are you ready? Or
through the chair, that it's a bit of a complex issue because there is a pending license and a active building permit. So it's a little bit more complex, an active construction to receive direction, which is normally staff make that decision on whether to issue a license or not direction from council. So this one is a little bit more complex than a location that's been dark for 6 months.
And I, through you, Mr. Chair, I appreciate that there's a building permit and anybody can apply, apply for a building permit. I don't think that's going to be an issue. The issue is whether or not right now, unless you've already issued the license, whether or not we have, because it's been not in operation for more than 6 months, whether we have a legal opportunity to reduce the number of licenses. Because I remember way back, we had this discussion and we looked at, council of the day sort of set in stage that if people weren't operating, that we would reduce the number of licenses. And that's why I'm interested in at least knowing for sure whether we have the right or not. So in any event, a report back when all this other stuff comes back would be fine. I just don't understand if that question is up in the air, why we would issue a license before you have a firm answer. Because once you issue that license, I don't think we'll have that discussion regardless, because that would create quite a problem. But if we have an opportunity now, I think my colleagues and I would hope, if we would like to have that discussion, I would hope.
Councillor?
I think we're going way off topic. I think the subject here, I respect what my colleague is saying, and I think that the information that he's providing here is not the same information that I remember on that subject, but I believe it's a different topic than what we're talking about here. I think we should deal with this subject, and if we want to come up with a new motion to look after this that he's talking about, that's okay, but we're talking about a bylaw here to change the licensing cost. And I think we should stick to that. That's the motion that is up here. So I know that legal has their hand up, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make sure that we don't drift too far.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the councillor has taken the words right out of my mouth. You're here to debate and to discuss the report that's before you and the amendments to the bylaw and some of the things that have been, and what has been said at the public participation meeting. Mr. Katolik could report back on other things as directed. The license manager, council has delegated to the license manager the authority to issue the licenses. So we should be careful in terms of what types of direction are given at this point.
Councillor Cassidy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to comment a little bit on Ms. Walker's presentation through you. Thank you for coming here. And I think we all understand that we can't delve into federal jurisdiction, but I think it's completely appropriate to have this information here. It's completely appropriate to remind us all that there are some activities that take place at these establishments. We know, I can't say for sure that any has ever happened in London, but we know that this takes place at these kinds of establishments. And it's important when this bylaw is before us for consideration that we keep that in mind. So I have a number of questions. The first one is, notwithstanding what the lawyer in the public gallery, the information or his concerns about some of the parts of the bylaw. It says under the Municipal Act, under Section 154, that the municipality has the right to prohibit any person entering these establishments if they're under the age of 18. Under that section, it also says that we can prohibit an entertainer from being employed in any of these establishments under the age of 18. So my concern is the province, who brings us the Municipal Act, also regulates gaming establishments. So they have set the prohibition at the age of 19 for entering or working in a gaming establishment, but they've only set it at 18 for these kinds of establishments, which I would argue our young women are much more vulnerable in these kinds of establishments than they are in a casino. And I'm wondering if we have any leeway there. Could we raise the age, or does the Municipal Act restrict us to that age of 18? Or could we say in the City of London, anybody who works in any of these establishments or enters must be 19 years of age or older? And I'm looking for an answer from staff on that one.
Go to staff, Mr. Katolik, if you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the Municipal Act makes an express provision with respect to regulating adult entertainment establishments and provides the municipality the discretionary authority to prohibit any person carrying on or engaged in an adult entertainment established business from permitting any person under the age of 18. So the statute says expressly 18 to enter or remain in the establishment. So if the municipality wanted to set a higher age limit, we could look at that more closely, but it clearly provides for the age of 18. It's written right into the Act. That's a long-standing provision of the Municipal Act. That's not new as a result of the 2007 amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be interested in pushing that. I think 18's too young. My niece just turned 18 last month, and I certainly think she's too young. We recognize how vulnerable the girls in our society are, and I think we have to afford them as much protection as we can. I have some more questions. Under section 4.3 and 4.2, it talks about, sort of goes where Councillor Armstrong was going about the number of licenses, that the limit is 7 for the live entertainment body rub parlor. It's very confusing, some of this terminology, I would like you to know. So it limits it to 7 and 5 for another kind of establishment. I can't really make sense of which one is which. So how many do we have now, is my question?
Through the chair, we have 4 adult live entertainment parlors, and we have 7 body rub parlors. And the recommendation is that if any body rub parlors close down, that the 7 get reduced to 5.
And is the live entertainment limit 5 as well?
It's 4.
Okay, and it says under 4.5, no person shall hold all of the adult live entertainment parlor owner licenses. How many is there a limit right now on how many one owner can hold?
We'll take a few minutes to find that, but the proposal is 1.
Thank you, and I have one final question. Section 5.1H talks about the police record check for the applicant, any partner, et cetera, et cetera. So right now, do we require that police record check? And going forward, what's the end? So it just says that we'll require a police record check. If it turns anything up, do we refuse the license, or do we just have that information on file? I just want to know the point of Part H.
Through the chair, currently we require any particulars of a conviction, and we are proposing a police record check for all applicants and operators. And based on what we see in consultation with the police, recognizing what types of businesses these are, we will make an administrative decision on whether to issue a license or not.
Okay, Councillor Squire. Sorry, Councillor Usher was on, and then Squire. Oh, you're good, Councillor Squire.
Yeah, 2 things. First of all, I agree with Councillor Usher. This is a licensing bylaw, and I am concerned, and I will say I'm concerned. I'm not going to make a moral judgment about ages and who should be working in these, because it's not my function as municipal politician and within these regulations. I can't do that. If somebody wants to hear my view on these places, they will hear it in another forum. But I just worry that the more we speculate on what we would like to see in terms of these businesses that are otherwise legal, we're going to get into a problem with legal challenges. And what we're saying here will be part of a legal challenge, where people are saying, look, I was a council, and councilors were saying they're making moral judgments, or they believe these certain things. And I am concerned about that because of my background, that we have to look at this the same way as other things in terms of licensing, because they are legal. Now, all the other issues raised by Ms. Walker are completely legitimate issues with regard to criminality that should be enforced according to law, as I said. But I can't, as a councillor, sit here and make value judgments whether I would want to or not.
Thanks. I'm just going to respond to that, and I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to, I'm not debating or anything. I'm just going back to the pet licensing bylaw. And we talked about whether or not guinea pigs and rabbits should be included in the same category as cats and dogs. So we do go in this kind of detail when we're talking about these bylaws that are coming forward from staff. So I respectfully disagree with the councillor, and if we're regulating an industry like this through a bylaw, then we have, the part of the reason for regulating it is protection of individuals who partake or participate in this industry. And that is completely within our realm, I believe. Thank you.
Next up on the speaker list, Councillor Squire.
I mean, I'm not, all I did was express my own opinion, okay? And I'm not, you know, I'm not making a value judgment. I'm just saying that I'm concerned when people start making value judgments that it may impact us from a legal point of view. So I do not like it, and I will say, when I say something and then right away someone decides they have to respond to that and say, I just disagree with him. I've never liked that. I don't think that's proper debate. I think we should be addressing the issues at large. So I'll leave it at that.
Was there any other speakers?
Need to leave.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just look to committee. I think there's another speaker, Armstrong. I'm not sure if there's, and then there's Councillor Helmer. So, Councillor Armstrong.
Well, I'm good with supporting this. Afterwards, though, I would like staff to report back on the earlier issue I discussed, whether or not there's an opportunity for reducing the number of licenses. And also, as I recall, many years ago, there was a discussion that on a yearly basis, we would monitor, because one establishment, when the police were asked to provide us with information about the operation, there were literally hundreds of occurrences, as I recall. And I think that can form part of a rationale as to whether or not a license also could be not renewed. So I'd like to hear more, but later on from staff on those two issues, unless you want to do it now, but I'm willing to wait. So in any event, I'm ready to vote so that we can move along here, and then Councillor Usher will know what I'll be bringing forward next.
Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. A couple of questions for our staff. I know when we discussed this back in, I think, June of 2016, something I said at the time was I hope that we have, lots of consultation with the people who are actually working in the industry, especially when we were talking about police record checks. And I wonder if our staff could just speak to how we actually have engaged the operators and the attendants and the entertainers and other kinds of stakeholders before this came forward, because I know we have the public meeting, but just in advance of the public meeting, if you give me an overview of how that went.
Through the chair, throughout this process and earlier on, we had some discussions with Ms. Teresa Simone, who represents, I believe, the entertainers in this industry across Ontario. And the discussions we had there were around the police record checks and actually licensing the attendants and entertainers. And through discussions with her, a lot of good points were made, and that's why we chose to go with Regulation 8.6, that the parlors and operators of body rubs maintain a record rather than licensing and going through the police record checks. Because I heard loud and clear at the CAPS committee meeting in June that was not the direction that City Council wanted to go to during that debate. We have on our website all the information of upcoming meetings, and we maintain a list of email addresses. I don't know how long that list is, but I know it's lengthy, and we send out emails about upcoming PPMs of different categories. I do want to remind Council, though, that the process that we went through was one to look at categories at specific times at PPMs and then come back with an omnibus PPM in the fall of this year.
Part of the reason I raised it is one of the people who spoke, I believe, was the lawyer. He was talking about the no touching prohibitions, as if that was something new in the bylaw. In fact, it exists now in the current bylaw, and it was very confusing to me that we were talking about things that are not proposing to be changed. They're existing prohibitions that are already in there under like Section 3 and Section 5 and the existing business licensing bylaw. Similarly, there's restrictions in there about age that are already in there. And we're not talking about changing those. Well, we're talking about changing some parts of it, but not necessarily changing very much. And so, you know, I wish, and this is sort of feedback to everybody, I guess, who participate in the public meeting, especially if we're having another public meeting, to be very specific about the parts that, you know, you're concerned about. And I think it was helpful when we were talking about the licensing of operators and requiring operators to be on site. I can certainly understand why, you know, the business cost for that could be seen as like the $500 license fee, not such a big deal, but employing a person, you know, every day, all year, that's a very expensive thing for a business. So I hope we can get a bit more specific about the areas of concern, because we had a lot of general talking, some of which was about the existing bylaw and saying like, you know, this is almost like ultra vires, you can't do that. And it's like, well, that's the current regime right now. And so I appreciate the discussion. To Ms. Walker, I listened to the argument about all things that are going on in strip clubs and body rub parlors being prostitution. I'm not convinced by that at all. I looked at the question and answers provided by the Department of Justice, trying to define what is a sexual service, and it certainly seems to contemplate that there are things that could happen at strip clubs and massage parlors that wouldn't be. And most of the examples that they give involve touching, and we expressly prohibit that. So, you know, I'm just not convinced by that line of argument, but I certainly understand why she's making it, and I want to thank her for coming.
So I know Councillor Cassidy had a question that she raised earlier, so I'm not sure if that was ready before, I guess, we call a question. I'll just look and see if there's any other speakers. I think maybe they need another minute.
Other question?
I think there's just a question that Councillor Cassidy was waiting for. So you can give their question a response offline if that's easier for you. Okay, great. So I look to committee for this been moved by Councillor Squire, seconded by Councillor Usher. So just for the members of the public to understand what's happening, So the conversation is still going to continue. Staff have made a commitment to engage with the stakeholders, some of the people that have spoken today, as well as people who've spoken down at this level as well. So you'll be able to follow the process, and then the final bylaw will come before City Council in the fall, and that's when a decision will be made by Council. So if you're following, you can check on the City website, and thank you all for engaging. And we'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Excuse Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Usher, for your service, and enjoy your evening. So, and again, members of the public are welcome to hang out for the rest of the meeting tonight, but if you're busy, that's understandable. So we're going to get to item number 10, I believe, items for direction. So we have a public submission request for delegation status from Y Marbin taxi plate issuing. So I'll just look to committee to see what you guys want to do with that. Sir Armstrong?
I don't have a problem with granting the request for the next meeting or whatever.
Perfect. So we'll get a motion up for a further future meeting request. Great. And look for a seconder. I think I saw Councillor Cassidy nodding her head for some reason. Yep.
Oh yeah, grab my glory.
Hold on, Councillor Horst, Mr. Kotolak.
Through the chair, staff already have direction to come back with potential changes to all licensing ratio, accessible and non-accessible, following additional consultation with the industry and other stakeholders. And this came out through the vehicle for hire public meetings. So I would just suggest to committee that this item be referred to staff for consideration, because we get these requests all the time in writing, and I could tell you that there's no one position from the taxi industry on this matter.
Well, perhaps when staff report back on that issue, then this person be given an opportunity to have delegation. I think that's what I'm hearing, that this shouldn't be a standalone, that there's, is that what staff is recommending? That if we're going to hear from this person, it should be at a later date?
That's correct. Any changes to the vehicle for hire bylaw will require a public participation meeting.
Well, I just want to be clear. You don't think we should be entertaining delegations at this point? Or are you coming back with something in the future and that's?
We'll be coming back with a report in the future because that's the direction that you've given us. But we get these requests all the time. It's just that this one is showing up on your agenda.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm going to withdraw my second for the delegation and on the belief that at a later date, I'd be happy to support a request when staff brings forward any future reports.
Let's just look into the seconder. And so it's both Whip and John. I do have a question, if you'll allow me, to Mr. Catola. Do we know when that's coming back, that discussion, just so that I guess the resident would know?
We'll be coming back with a report in Q2 of 2018. In the fall of this year, we'll be coming back with a report on the statistics from the new vehicle for hire bylaw in terms of rides, number of licensed drivers, et cetera, as was directed by council.
So, I mean, I'm in the chair right now, so I'll give you the chair for a second, Councilor Armstrong, if that's okay. Thank you. So my question is, I think because if it's up until 2018, my concern if this person is asking a delegation request, I don't know if they have something imminent or, if they want to come and spend 5 minutes, I'm fine with that. I'll move that. I don't think there'll be a seconder, and then I'll just move from there, kind of go from there. So I'd move to accept delegation requests from them, but I don't know if there'll be a seconder. Oh, never mind.
Councillor Squire, you wish to speak?
I just think we'll be hearing a delegation status about something that is far too premature to change and also would have huge ramifications and we'd be heading down that road. So I think to indicate a person, oh, it's great, you just come here and talk. We're not going to do anything, but come here and talk. That's not something that I'm going to support, and it doesn't mean I don't like to hear from people. It's just in this particular case, I think you're giving someone sort of false hope.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Squire. Any other councillor wish to speak? Go ahead, councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I have a question through you to staff. Has anyone on staff had any conversations with this particular individual?
Go ahead, staff. I'd like to respond.
I don't recall having conversations with this individual.
No, Presiding Officer, I could help respond with that because the person did reach out to me in my role as a chair, if you wanted a response. And what he said was apparently that he was representing the voice of a few hundred members as they had some petition, and that's why they were asking for delegation status. So I didn't get anything really further than that. I just said, this is how you request delegation status. And that was kind of what I got from at that stage.
Okay, Councillor, that's good information. Councillor Helmer, you wish to speak on this issue?
Thank you, and I'm glad to see Mr. Barbin send something in, because, you know, very often I think what happens is people go directly to staff because they don't really want to be out in public saying things like this when they work in the industry, and they're fearing, you know, retribution, right? They'll be cut off from being able to drive anymore, and I've heard from many drivers throughout the whole course of the debate we had in the last couple of years that they, you know, didn't want to show up at public meetings and say these things because they were worried about that. And I'm glad that he has stepped forward to say that. I'm not surprised. You know, we have all these different categories of private vehicles for hire, and only one of them is capped, and it's the taxis, the accessible and the regular. All the rest of them are not. And I think it's just inevitable that we're going to be having this discussion at a certain point. Certainly not everyone agrees. You know, the people who have the licenses now don't want them to be unlimited. The people who don't have the licenses now would like them to be unlimited so they can get out from underneath that system and have more freedom to operate and drive and provide the service. So, you know, Q2 2018, I know it sounds like it's far away. It's actually not that far away. It's like less than a year from now. It does feels like just like yesterday we were talking about the taxi and limousine licensing bylaw. And we'll be talking about it probably every year, right? It just comes up all the time. So I think it's a good idea to have him to pass this motion to grant the delegation status. It just says at a future meeting. It doesn't say at the next meeting. It doesn't say, you know, it's just to say when we do talk about it, you can have delegation status, which I think is great.
Well, thank you for your comments, Councillor. Councillor Squire, you wish to speak?
Councillor Helmer's right, and he convinced me. So I don't want people to think, you know, people think I can't be swayed when I hear from people. And that was a very constructive thing that you did, and I agree with you, and I'm going to support this.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. I have another question. As far as, I believe the idea of limiting or not limiting the number of taxi licenses was something that came up, that we discussed and that we voted on. So this would be a decided matter of council. When would the year be up that we could change this without reconsideration?
I refer to the clerk for direction, but the decision was at the November 8th council meeting last year.
Okay, thank you for your comments, staff. Any other comments? Okay, call a question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Councillor Salee, you're going to take the chair.
Thank you. So we have item number 11, deferred matters list, so I'll look to committee and just look for a motion and get that up on the screen then. Any discussion? And we'll call a question. And we're voting. And the results.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
All right. So what we'll do is, because I don't want to remove myself from the chair right now, so I'll come back to 12 if that's okay, and we'll just go to number 13 and 13. So any discussion on 13? Seeing none, so then we'll get the motion up on the screen. Look for a mover and a seconder. Oh, Councillor Squire.
Yeah, just to speak to the motion, I'm fine with it going ahead. I'll be supporting it, I guess. Yeah.
All right. Councillor Squire's pretty brief today. Call the question and call the vote. And the results.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Item 14, any speakers? We'll get that up on the screen. Look for a mover and seconder, and we'll call the question. And we're voting. Need a mover and seconder again.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
All right, and Councillor Armstrong can take the chair for a second. All right, thank you for recognizing me, presiding officer. So I just want to put this forward and move it. I'll look for a seconder. So while people are reading that, maybe I'll just speak to it, if you allow me.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you.
Have a minute.
So the intent of this, so right now what we have a situation with is the police are getting faxes. So it's, when we talk about modernizing our bylaws and actually catching up. So right now, local venue, secondhand lending locations have to fax in documents and with the serial numbers and things like that. And that has been actually cumbersome for police. And that has in times have been hard to kind of read what the information is, and has been almost a barrier for them in their capacity as well as for our bylaw officials. So I think by modernizing this and trying to find ways to make it more efficient and to reduce the concerns with items that have been stolen and going through these locations, I think this is one small measure that we can do to protect our community and ensure that there's compliance, and to recognize that it's 2017 by modernizing it as part of the previous direction to modernize the City of London bylaws.
Any other councillor? Go ahead, Councillor Squire.
This is one of those cases where I understand what Councillor Salee is saying. I'm just looking at what's here. And for instance, it says, and to provide additional information to assist law enforcement with investigations. I mean, often people buy things and can purchase things that are stolen without their knowledge or any knowledge at all. And I'm not sure what we're going to require businesses to do to provide information to police, how cumbersome it's going to be, how enforceable it's going to be. So I'll support it, but I just want people to understand that it's going to be very important to me what this will look like when it comes back. And it will be really important to see if the industry has had input into this. For instance, people who operate pawn shops or sell goods secondhand, which there's a lot of. I mean, there's thrift shops, there's all kinds of things, businesses that sell goods secondhand, and I don't think you can expect them to take all the various steps that are necessary to ensure that something may or may not be stolen. So I'll support it with a lot of caution as to where we're going with this.
If you don't mind, I'll speak from the chair. I'm happy to support this. I hope there'll be consultation with the police, and because there's no decision here, it's just asking for staff to look into this. I understand that there isn't any firm evidence. It's anecdotal. There's no evidence at this point, but maybe the police can provide us with, information that would support what's being requested here. So I'm willing to keep an open mind and at least look into it, because from time to time we do, no matter what, need to review these bylaws and make sure that they are up to date. That's why we're here. Things do change, but I just want there would have to be some serious information here to warrant increasing this this system that's in place, and creating more work for the owners of these businesses. And I understand what the councillor wants to do, but in any event, I'll support it for now. Sir, you're ready with your questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I just wonder through you to staff when this, so I know we're getting little chunks of bylaws that we're reviewing. Sometimes we're getting one at a time. But I'm wondering if you have an estimation of when this particular one will be coming to us for review.
Tentatively, July 18th at the CAPS meeting for a PPM.
Thank you. And so I'm supportive of requesting staff to consider this and I'm hopeful that there's enough time for staff to consider this as part of the review.
Yes, we're currently having discussions with London Police on this initiative.
Councillor?
I'll just wrap up.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I wonder if Councillor Salee could explain a bit more, like, what exactly it means, the cloud-based shared photography. I'm afraid I don't really understand what the alternative you'd like to see to the current practice. It seems like, and I'm just going to try and give you my understanding so that you can correct it if it's not right. So you want a platform where people can easily share with the police the goods that they have in their stores without them having to physically come there or receive a fax. And so that you want to have some kind of like, take a picture of everything and upload it somewhere where the police can look at it. Is that what you're suggesting?
So the intent really is, you know, right now it's archaic and to catch up with the times. So it would actually save police resources, bylaw resources, and maybe Mr. Catola can kind of talk of what is done now better than I can, but to really allow them to just take the goods on properties and it's not all the goods and properties. I'm hoping staff will come back and say specific. It might be high-end, particular item, or, you know, they leave that with staff. I think they'd have that answer better than I would, and with consultation with the police, and make those determinations. But currently, the police are getting all these faxes, and you could imagine getting a faxes that's handwritten from someone. Hard to read what a serial number may be off of, you know, maybe let's say a bicycle or whatever it may be in these pieces. So maybe if you want to maybe point your question, maybe the staff will be able to respond.
Through the chair, the current regulations require records to be maintained by all secondhand shop licensees. The date of the transaction, description of the article, the serial number, and the name and address of the person from whom the article was acquired. And the information, I understand, is faxed to the police. I don't believe that every licensed establishment is on a daily basis faxing that information because of the numerous transactions that occur. In our research, we know that the City of Edmonton has a similar program where for certain items, so for example, items that could be higher end electronics, bicycles, where you can take a photo of the serial number, they're photographed, and then the police have real-time data. So if somebody calls in and says, you know, my I had a break-in, my PS4 has been stolen, my Kona bicycle, here's a serial number, the police can go real-time and see that that's been taken to a pawn shop. So at this point, it's an idea. It's something that we have to consult with the industry because we have to be cognizant of the amount of work that would be required and the number of transactions that occur in these secondhand shops.
Call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
I'll take the chair back if that's okay. So, and just I know for the members of public following this, so you will have an opportunity to weigh in. I know I've had some conversations with you and staff will reach out as well. They'll send some information and there'll be a public participation meeting on July 18th was the date that was said specific to this, and you can have your opportunity to say exactly what you like. So I look for a motion to extend our meeting. Oh, just joking. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Squire, all those in favor. Have a good night.